I'm kind of curious how many people are interested in IMX right now. Did you guys see that announcement yesterday with Polygon?
Yeah, that was big. That was really interesting. I know the guys over at Polygon Studios, and I know this has been something they've been working on for a while. So really cool to see that blockchains are, working together to break down some of these barriers to entry for Web 2 and just making it easier for developers.
Yeah, they were talking about they have a nine-figure bank account, something like, I think it's like $250 million in US cash, just ready to develop.
Yeah, it's definitely awesome to see. I mean, Immutable has been doing a ton of really good work. I think, building out Rails and Polygon's kind of the OG, I feel like, for gaming, when it comes to, the faster track. So it's great to see them, working together rather than kind of building separately. And I know Immutable recently released a Unity SDK. So I think it's cool to see more of that, right? Because I think the Rails still need to be built quite a bit, and I think this is really going to accelerate a lot of people moving into the space. A lot of developers, indie developers who may not have the blockchain backgrounds, are going to have a little bit easier path to making this stuff happen.
One thing. Yeah, okay. I was just making sure my mic's still on. Yeah, I'm kind of excited to see, because I see like don't even talk about Facebook, but like that's not the place to talk about NFTs from my experience. But like I see people talking about NFTs and they're totally clueless what's going on. A lot of these gamers are like Web2 maxis. They're like, oh, that's silly. Why would I want digital ownership? They just don't even understand. But from my understanding, the whole point of IMX is to completely get rid of that barrier, just like you said, that barrier to entry where they don't even know what a wallet is, essentially. They don't even know they're playing a Web3 game until they need to know, I suppose. I guess we'll see how that all turns out in the end, but I'm extremely excited about it. I've been a gamer my whole life, and I can't imagine, I've had some crazy successes in gaming in my life, and it's kind of cool to think about building a team or playing competitively or just having fun and actually generating something of value that might be able to be transferred to other things. Like I cannot imagine, because I'm a big Diablo fan, I cannot imagine the grandfather unique item that I found without any hacks, by the way. If I had that as an NFT in Diablo 1, or all the god items I had in Diablo 2, if it was an NFT game, right, which Diablo 4 isn't. But what if I could transfer those accounts and those items, those hundreds and hundreds of hours, sleepless months and months. What if I could transfer all that hard work to the next generation a game that they make? Like, wouldn't that be so rewarding as a gamer? And I would love to see the overall understanding of the space transfer to that, where that's just the norm. The next generation's like, oh yeah, of course. And why would you not play Web3 gaming? And once we see the games are just as awesome, right? Because now they have a lot of hurdles and stuff they have to develop, but I'm really excited about it. So thank you so much for inviting me to speak up here and talk with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge Diablo fan myself, and it's been a pretty big influence on what we're building at Satoshiverse. So glad to hear we have another Diablo fan on board. But let's get started. So today is going to be episode 20 of the Hideout. It's crazy that we've been doing this now for almost half of a year. It's been a ton of fun. We've had some awesome guests on, but today is definitely no exception. We've got an awesome panel. We're going to be talking about collecting gaming and collectibles NFTs. So basically anything other than your traditional art from from an artist, direct from the artist. So it's a pretty broad spectrum we're going to cover today. But we're lucky to have a really cool panel of different guests. So we'll start by letting everybody introduce themselves. I'll call on you guys, and then we will get started real quick. For myself, for those of you who may not know me, my name is Nick Frontera. I am co-founder and CEO of Apollo Entertainment, the company behind the Satoshiverse. We've been building the Satoshiverse for about 2.5 years now, and our Satoshi's Legions game for the last year and a half. Satoshi's Legions is an action roguelike RPG that is blockchain enabled. So exactly, what you were talking about before, the elements of that player progression in Diablo, the elements of games like Hades, with the roguelike component, and then elements of combat from games like God of War. So we've really been trying to build something unique, all the while, all your items are NFTs, all your progress is being stored in the NFT metadata, your experience is being tracked as an NFT. So a lot of cool things that we think are going to drive towards exactly, that future where people do own their items and people do have the control, and players do have that level of control. So really excited to talk with all of you. We have some great guests. So why don't we start with comics and crypto? Could you guys introduce yourselves, a little bit about what you're doing, and then we'll talk to everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having us, Nick. My name is Sean O'Hare. I'm a co-host of the Comics and Crypto podcast, along with Spencer Vogel and Kevin Loader. And we're a podcast that focuses on physical and digital collectibles. And we really focus on the bridging of physical and digital collectibles because we are huge believers in both spaces. And it's been a really fun journey for the past year and a half. And I'm excited to be here today.
Amazing. We're excited to have you, a frequent guest on our Hideouts, and that's because you guys cover so much space in such an awesome way. So thanks again for joining. Steve, why don't you give us a quick background? You're one of probably the inspirations for me getting into collecting a lot of the things I collected over the years in the early days. So really excited to have you here.
Nice. Well, happy to hear that. Yes, Steve Wand. I'm currently the co-founder of Not Fungible, as well as Adaptive Labs. I've been in the space for about 10 years. Early on, I started collecting physical crypto things from conferences and just e-hackathons and anything I could really get. There was kind of some sort of memento from those conferences or about the chains themselves. And NFTs were just a natural progression of that. I was very happy to hear about Counterparty in 15, 16. Just I wanted to see some TCGs and comics and things go online as digital assets. So that was very exciting. That led me kind of into Metaverse and then into art and everything else. So NFTs are one of many things that I collect. I do still collect a lot of physical collectibles, but yeah, I do have an appetite for a wide range of NFTs. So I'm excited, and thank you for inviting me to the panel.
Amazing. Yeah, I remember the early days of collecting Decentraland wearables and some World Cup kits in those days, and competing over who could get the best one. So those were fun times. I miss those times. Everything was so simple back then. But
yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So cool. I guess next, let's go to Excalibur. A big, huge Satoshiverse collector, always a great member of the community, someone I've had the pleasure of meeting in person many times, and happy to have, a member of our own on the panel today. So why don't you give a quick introduction to yourself, and then tell us a little bit about your interest in the space.
I appreciate that, Nick. I'm really happy to be here. I always happy to be part of the Satoshiverse Twitter space. Right now, I've been doing a lot of trading and investing, and I work with Braver, who's also over here, and part of his Braver crypto community to help a lot of our members find crypto gems and stuff like that. And so that's sort of what I've been working on right now. But it's with respect to the gaming side, I've been part of Satoshiverse probably, I think it was since we minted, right? About a month or two before Satoshiverse had minted, and I've been gaming since I was a fetus. Okay, I was playing Nintendo in my mother's womb. All right, that's how I've been into gaming for a very, very long time. And Satoshiverse, I saw this project, I thought it was amazing, and I just, I had to join up into it, and I love the art, and I love what's been done. I'm a big fan of Jose Delbo now, and I had the pleasure of meeting Nick, as he had just mentioned, at Comic-Con, and I knew that this team can pull off this amazing, amazing venture. So I'm just really happy to be here, guys. So I appreciate it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining. Let's go to Eric. Eric is, OG crypto art collector. Been, if you look at his wallet, you'll be impressed by the number of just gems and grails that he's got in it, but also, big into some collectibles and PFPs and different projects. So Eric, give us a little bit of background on what you've been doing lately and what got you into this space.
Hey, thanks, Nick. So I'm Eric Young. I primarily a digital art collector in the NFT space. Started in the summer of 2020. It was really Trevor Jones's Bitcoin bull that brought me in, and I just continued to collect. And I would say by the summer of 2021, I had one of the broadest digital art collections in the NFT space across some of the top artists. And so, I've diversified a little bit, invested into some of the other projects, PFPs, collectibles, and, ironic that we're talking about collectibles, but hopefully my perspective from a digital art perspective can still be helpful. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, and I think, at least for me, in the early days, there was a lot of crossover, and you do have several collections like ours, which, found its foundation in Jose. You have, Josie's project, right? That's really great. And I mean, there's several. Boss Logic has Boss Logic Universe. So I do think you've seen quite a few artists kind of venture into this realm. Hackatow with Kings and Queens. And I love that. I love to see these artist influenced projects because it does bring, I think, a different perspective to it. So I do think you'll have a really, really unique perspective there. And then finally, Teo, why don't you give us a quick introduction to yourself? We know you're a Diablo fanatic, but what else you got going on?
So, I mean, I'm not sure where to begin really, but I'm relatively new to Web3. I got introduced by my brothers to NFTs in general right around when Neo Tokyo minted their first identities. We had 9 whitelists for that, and at the time didn't even know how to mint to contract. So watched almost $1 million flow out the door, which was one of the most depressing and exciting days ever. But I'm just what I'm doing here is I was invited by you guys to kind of share what I'm doing with Guild of Guardians, which I guess we'll get into a little later. But I'm here to recruit you. I'm trying to what I'm working on specifically with them is I'm trying to make the #1 team in the world. I've done that with other games. I was #1 in Diablo 2 US East ladder, and I had another guild where I was in a game called King's Road with about 10 million people, and our team was pretty much undefeated #1 for a decade. And I'm just trying to learn from everyone. I'm trying to be a sponge and learn, and I guess we're going to get into how we all research and all that, but I'm just pretty much here trying to find the best gamers in the world that understand NFTs are the future, that like dungeon crawlers and mobile gaming. That's kind of what I'm here to learn from you guys and share what I'm working with at. So
very cool. No, that's great, and you'll definitely find at least one of those in me. But I can't say that I would be much help on a competitive esports team. As I these days I don't have the time to grind as much as I used to. But I love it, and thank you for joining, and definitely excited to hear your perspective. I guess, Spencer, why don't you give us a quick introduction of yourself, and then we can take it away.
Sure thing. Yep, my name is Spencer Vogel. So I've been working with Satoshiverse and Apollo Entertainment for the last couple of years, helping out on the business development and strategy side of things. So I'll be hosting the space today. And I'm also, coincidentally, one of the co-hosts of the Comics and Crypto podcast. So hey there, Sean. So one of the things we're going to be doing to start off is be doing a question that's going to be suited to everyone. And then we'll be moving into some individual questions for everybody in the group. So to start off with the first individual question, Sean, I'll put you on the hot seat and have you start off on this one. How do you go about researching and evaluating different NFT collections before deciding to purchase them?
Man, it's it's weird to be on the opposite end with you. So as far as the individual collectibles, for myself, I've been really heavily involved in, for example, the VB digital collectibles that are licensed by Disney and Marvel, and having a background in comic books, it's been a blessing to be able to recognize what are the grails, what are the big keys, So it's been easy to connect and associate with those kind of collectibles. But if I'm looking at it at a company, or specifically a company or a project, outside of Marvel or Disney, that kind of IP, there's three things that I really look at. It's the quality of the product, the leadership team, and also the partners. But something over the past year that I've come to realize that's really, really, really important in Web3 is community. Community is so important, and especially right now during a bear market, you see what kind of communities are still thriving. And I think that speaks volumes about the company and their collectibles.
Totally. And yeah, guys, feel free to jump in. But maybe Eric, do you want to jump in next?
Yeah, I mean, I guess on that topic, I feel like one of the things that, we kind of like talk about all these projects, and we kind of analyze them about, where they are in their current state. But, outside of like CryptoPunks and, maybe CryptoKitties, none of these projects have actually been through kind of a full cycle. So it's hard to, look at these projects and say, well, if I look at the price, it's probably going to be a failure, right? Versus, something that's high priced, right? And I think that you kind of need to see that cycle, flush through, right? A lot of these projects, we'll probably say like 90% plus of them, probably won't survive the bear market. And so, it'll be interesting to see now that, royalties have been, pretty much cut off, how they kind of develop, new revenue streams. A lot of them that have fundraised a lot, hopefully can be able to make through it. But, to be able to, see whether or not they're going to kind of come back to life in the next cycle. And so I think it's very hard to kind of analyze, like, what's a good project, what's a bad project, whether or not a project will survive simply based on, some of the things that I looked at, credibility of team and, a lot of the projects I've supported, they've been, projects where I knew the founder, knew the creator, had a lot of trust in their ability to build. But, that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll survive or thrive, right, in the next cycle. So, I think it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
I'd like to add that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so, I mean, think about it. I don't even remember where I got these figures from, but I believe it's 95% of businesses, traditional businesses, in the US at least, they fail within 5 years. And then 95% of those fail within 10 years, within 5 more years. So you're talking about 120 out of 120 multiplied. That's 1 out of 400 businesses that survive a decade. And then you go into the NFT space, which is, pretty new, unprecedented territory from my understanding. And I really want to piggyback off what you guys were saying, where like the leadership team, do they have funding? Can they create some sort of economy and ecosystem where people want their product? Can you create a value, like, for instance, with gaming, right? This is a big thing that Gilded Guardians is always talking about. They're like, we're trying to attract people that are not just trying to make money. We're trying to attract people that enjoy mobile gaming. They pick up the game for 20 minutes, put it down. Pick it up for 20 minutes, put it down. While they're on the toilet, while they're at a meeting, passively playing, but still building something, right? And then eventually they'll realize, oh, look, I have a wallet full of assets or whatever, right? But I would highly recommend, when it comes to what is your goal? If you're in the NFT space, you need to realize it's extremely risky. With those figures I just gave you, just say 1 out of 100 will survive, right? Like, if you're in what I've picked up from bull markets is, in a bull market, look at the hype, go get a whitelist, beat someone else. As soon as it mints, it might go up, and then it probably is going to go down. Most of them seem to just trend right after a mint. The hype's gone. It's my little brother, who's made a lot of money with VFriends, actually. He always says, the money goes where the attention is. So in a bull market, it's about hype. But in a bear market, it's the best time to build, right? And you have to go for the fundamentals. Like, what are they going to do like a traditional business to generate money? Are they just going to mint out and then what, right? Compete with the whole planet? So it might be a niche market. They might be doing a big moonshot or something small, but you have to kind of figure out your appetite. Never put in more than you can risk to lose. And if you like the art, that's freaking awesome. Collect the art. Everybody does that. But if you're in it for what a lot of, they use that term degen, right? NFT degen. They're talking about, oh, how do I make $4,000 turn into $12,000 in 15 minutes? That's crazy, but it does happen. You just need to understand that it can very much go the opposite direction. And mathematically speaking, buying and holding onto a 1 in 400 chance project or 1 in 100 chance project is pretty risky. So kind of, when you do your research, talk to folks like this on the call, or make your network of friends. Find people that you trust that are doing their research. And when you hear multiple people in different groups talking about the same thing, that'll kind of light up your ears a little bit. It's like, okay, let me do some more. Let me look at the leadership team. What kind of partnerships are they working on? What is the product they're producing? Is this something I might enjoy? Right. So I just kind of wanted to chime in on exactly what you guys saying, like hitting the bullseye on that. So.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, and I agree a lot with both of those points. Specifically, a point Eric made about, the funding and kind of the partnerships and where these games are going in terms of surviving the bull market. Kind of taking off the founder's hat for a second, I've always been very interested in gaming NFTs and collectibles NFTs, and speaking more towards the gaming side of things. I think what I've learned being on the other side of the equation, right, as a founder and as someone who's building these things, is that it's quite easy to, spend 20, 30 grand, develop a really good trailer, generate some hype around a launch. And then the question is, and then what, right? We've seen a ton of collections, I won't name names, but they're gaming projects that were super hyped, did really well in the bull market, and then realized, I think, that developing a good game isn't just about money. You need a lot of infrastructure and really know-how within the industry to build a game that actually works. And, I think you're seeing a lot of indie studios try to do that. And I do think we're going to see quite a few really cool games come out in the next couple of years on the backs of that funding. But I also think we saw quite a few projects raise, on the promise of making a game without that infrastructure, and then go and try to hire out or try to, work with a third party to build their game. And quite a few of them have already failed. I think that, when I look at very similar things to what Eric was saying. I want to know the founding team. I want to know their capabilities. I want to see that they have a track record of delivering, because a game is a very difficult thing to deliver, let alone, a good game. So when we're talking about businesses failing, the game really does have to be unique. And I think, the narrative that kind of surrounded PFPs likely won't surround gaming NFTs long term. I think what you're going to end up seeing is something quite a bit more like, your traditional games, your traditional RPGs, where there's not necessarily a ton of items worth $10,000, but there's tons of items worth, $50 to $100. And you can get those items by grinding and putting in work and trading, and then, building upon characters that are really well developed. And then maybe, account level type items could really accumulate a ton of value, right? Like that aggregate of all of your progress. But I think, unfortunately right now, the gaming and even like this PFP market is incredibly, overvalued, overpriced, because at the end of the day, 30,000, 40,000 for an NFT that just gives you access to an ecosystem isn't going to cut it. And I don't, it really doesn't matter how great that ecosystem is, unless that NFT is giving you something directly, I guess, financial within the ecosystem. And so, one thing we've been thinking about a lot with Satoshiverse isn't so much, okay, how do we, gate access, but it's more, how do we make our holders part of that player economy, right? How do we create a player economy that aligns the incentives between the holders and the founding team, so that as we're developing out, this player economy and just creating value, creating a game that people want to play and collect items and go from level to level and progress, how do we then tie in the holders so that everything we're doing from a development and revenue generation perspective also makes sense for the holders of the NFTs, and keeping that price point at a manageable level. At the end of the day, you're going to need 50 to 100,000, probably millions of gamers if we actually want to see some real Web3 games really succeed. So making sure that the model scales, and I've seen a lot of games that they just don't scale. Like the point of entry is too high, and that point of entry will never be able to bring in 10,000 even people. So I think that we have to, with gaming NFTs, it is going to be a rough next probably year or two before I think things really start to take off and we start to see the rails built out. But I think the projects that are doing it right, the projects that are really building out, aligning their incentives as developers with the holders of their different assets within their ecosystem, are going to be the best ones to align yourselves with. Because I think at the end of the day, even with the bigger studios, one of the really interesting things about Web3 is that we're all in this together, right? That we are kind of building together, and I think that's what makes this special, and it's ultimately going to be what drives us forward.
Scalpers, do you guys have anything to add to this?
I think that most of the great stuff has already been said. Just to add a little bit, I think that the number one thing I try to invest into, if my goal is investment, is I most of the time I look for expertise, not necessarily potential, because I've discovered that pretty much everybody has potential, but not everybody has expertise. And on the expertise side, especially for NFTs, I think I've noticed that it's sort of expertise in whatever the particular category of that NFT is. Like, so say it's gaming, it needs to have developers behind it. It needs to have people who are extremely apt in software and everything, all of that there, but also people who are really good in finances, because it really helps in establishing these sort of gaming economies. I truly think that for NFTs and their successful future, it's going to be through gaming. All the foundation and everything will be led, I believe, from gaming and starting off there. And then everything else in the world will be touched eventually by things like NFTs. And Satoshiverse is one of those amazing sort of games that I just kind of was envisioning this for also when I first discovered it. And I just it was just kind of like, I would just think about this. I'm like, this is sort of exactly the sort of thing that I was looking for in terms of gaming economies and stuff. And so this is the sort of thing that I think I hunt for if I were to look for NFTs in terms of investment. In terms of collectibles and stuff like that, I mean, that just depends on whatever your passions are and everything. And for me, this was a big passion of mine. And so that's sort of why I kind of went in that direction. And so those are the few points that I wanted to add.
If you look at the earliest of projects, technically, like the Spells of Genesis, it was almost like the Magic the Gathering coming on chain. There's been a demand or a want for this. I went through the ICO era where I just saw a ton of fast nonsense with money thrown at it and a lot of losses. No one asked the right questions at the time because there was money being made. I think now we're a lot smarter. A lot of people do a lot more research before investing. But as far as some of these projects, I mean, if aesthetically you're buying it, that's one thing. But if you're buying it playing Follow the Leader or the weekly hype game, thinking you're going to 10x and that's your goal, I don't imagine many are executing on that 100%. I think it's near impossible to do better than like 50% at most times. So there's been tries at this before. We saw chain breakers. Chain breakers came and disappeared. OX Universe, I own land in that as well back in the day. They came around 2018 and went away in like 2020, 2021. So there's been games that came out, weren't the highest of quality, like Epic rivaling, but they were pretty damn good for being blockchain technology at the time. They had decent communities. They were just almost too early. So there wasn't nearly the community and ecosystem built around it to sustain it, nor get the attention of the masses to even come and dabble in something that can scale properly yet. So once we've got something that I think rivals an Epic game, if you show people the two models, like, do you want your assets frozen and controlled, or do you want a free flowing, like, open ecosystem that can have royalties built in, so they can still be profit driven, and we can all have a free market trading these assets? That's the proper way to do it. And I think with like Blancos, they announced today there's 6 projects that are ETH based. Blancos was one of them. Blancos came out about 3 years ago, and EOS, I think, made a bridge with ETH as well, but it was a whole bunch of ex-comic, like 80s and skateboard dudes, and they did them, and they're like the Funkos, only they're online like Blancos, and they come into a game. And so things like that, if you produce the same quality with the same engagement level, and just like someone likes it and enjoys it as much, and you've got this model compared to that, I don't know many people in their right mind that would choose the existing model compared to what this would be offering at that time.
Wow, man, was Blanca's really 3 years ago? I feel like my
100%, and I haven't opened any of mine. And I mean, they quietly were building, and EOS kind of went whatever with when Wax like lost the type. But they've been doing some good like stuff on the back end. They made a bridge with ETH last year, and then now they were the first title released with Epic that they were working with. So that's like, those are the strides we need to make. And when like Steam comes out and says we're blocking NFTs, like, that means that you're scared your business model will eventually become obsolete. Like, adapting, integrating, and learning, and like staying ahead of the curve is what you should be if you're a Fortune 500 company. Like, ignoring it and putting your head in the sand is the exact opposite of what anyone should be doing.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Do you guys remember I mean, I was pretty young, I'm 35, but the dot-com bubble, when folks were saying the internet was a fad? And no one thought that it would be ubiquitously in every single person's pocket at all times, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's interesting. One kind of recurring theme is that the NFTs and blockchain, really NFTs, are going to be the biggest thing since e-commerce, right? And no one was thinking e-commerce when the internet first came out, and it took a little while, but that was the eventual result, right? And completely paradigm shifted the way that we buy things. So yeah, I think that we're going to see that in the next several years with NFTs. And fortunately, kind of as a founder, I get to see a lot of what's in the works, and it's really cool to see how many different angles people are taking, both in and outside the gaming space, with NFTs. So I think we're going to get to see some really cool stuff. It's just takes a long time to build this stuff. There's no shortcut to building, great products within the gaming space, and it's time and resources. So my hope is that the funding keeps coming, the community keeps pushing, that the interest stays, because it's gonna take that in order for this to be successful. I think it's going to have to be, that the space wills it into being, because I can tell you, for Web2 game developers right now, they like their business model. So the Web3 system is very gamer leaning and customer driven, and so they're happy not to change away from that centralized model. So I think as a community, we have to start giving them a reason to, which is why I think that we really need to change the narrative around gaming NFTs in the Web2 space, with all the FUD that was there. But I think we'll eventually get there, and I think it's going to be important that we're all in that run.
Just wait till all the games are just as fun, right? It's just a question of time before they can scale these things, and then you're just having as much fun as ever, right, on a Web2 game. You don't even know it that you're on Web3, right? It'll get there.
Yeah, absolutely, Spencer. I know we got a bunch of other questions, so why don't we keep going?
Yep, for sure. So first individual question we're going to throw to Excalibur. So what is it that drew you to collecting Satoshiverse NFTs, and what other gaming NFTs do you collect, and why?
When I was in college, I played a game that I'm sure a lot of people probably know. It was called Destiny. And I remember there were a lot of communities and sort of clans that were sort of formed at the time. You know, that this gamers just kind of, that's what they do. Gamers just kind of, they show up in these games and then they form these groups and everything, and everybody goes on raids or they do fun stuff. They go to the different environments and interact, and everybody checks out each other's armor and guns and stuff like that. And I remember I was thinking to myself once, I was like, you know, it would be really cool if all of this like cool armor and these weapons and stuff like that, not only if they were customizable, but if they were purchasable, tradable, and things like that, and if they were also, if you can also just entirely sell a character on your own, and you don't have to do it through the interface of the actual system that was Destiny at the time. This is maybe like 10 years ago, and it just, lo and behold, so many years later, and I just kind of came across Satoshiverse, and it was doing a very, very similar model, and they looked similar too. And I was like, wow, this is quite epic. This is, first of all, this art is incredible. It was by happenstance that I happened upon Satoshiverse's art, and I looked a little bit deeper into it, and I learned more about Jose Delbo and his art collections and everything. And I remember thinking to myself that, you know what, this is a whole nother ball game. This right here is going to change the standard. And that's what I was thinking to myself at the time, because what's eventually going to happen is that I think that gamers are going to want to not only own their digital assets, but be able to trade them with each other. And eventually these economies will form. The cool thing about gaming is that you don't have to make anybody do anything. You just give the tools and the gamers figure it out. They just do all of the stuff on their own. That's the amazing part of it. Like the ownership, if it's there, then everything else they just sort of figure out. They talk to each other and they form these communities, and then all of a sudden an entire economy is sort of created. And one of the best things I think about the gaming community is arguably also one of the worst things, which is that the gaming community in general has a tendency to kind of whine and be very spoiled and bratty. It's true, you know, the gamers are like that, you know, and they'll complain about the most trivial things. But the funny thing is that the vulnerability I have seen to be the biggest strength as well, because gamers demand standards. They will not settle for less. Like if a game comes out nowadays in 2023 on, you know, let's say PC or one of the high-end consoles or something, and it's 30 frames per second, gamers are like, F you, we're not doing it. And it's like, it's such a trivial matter at face value, but that is what setting those standards, I think, is what really makes the gaming industry so innovative in and of itself. That's how I see Satoshiverse, the kind that sets standards. They meet their roadmaps. They were always on top of everything. Nick, he's really good at selling stuff. I always try to get Nick to talk as much as he can whenever I'm talking, because when Nick talks, he has a tendency to reveal alpha. And I'm like, Nick, just say more things. Like, because, you know, just like me, he's also a gamer at heart. He gets excited about it too, so he's gonna talk about it, right? So I'm like, as long as I can get this guy talking, like, he'll tell me something, you know. And like, but with Satoshiverse, like, I've never ever been disappointed with the new reveals or anything. Like, it's always met expectations and then some. And I'm very, very excited for what it looks like. And I don't know, it's just I have this gut feeling that Satoshiverse is going to set this whole new standard and plethora of things, like for the road to Web3 gaming for the rest of the world. And I know that that's probably overly ambitious and overzealous in some ways, but honestly, like I've been a gamer my whole life, and just as an individual, I can just tell you that I've seen the direction of where gaming probably, you know, kind of came from and what direction it's headed. And Satoshiverse is a project that I think is taking it in the proper direction, and that's sort of why I think I got involved, and I started to really become immersed with it and everything. And the other part of that is just, I mean, it's the team. The team is just remarkable. They're full of experts. They always answer your questions. One of the first things I loved about Satoshiverse's community is you can have people asking the same damn 100 like question again and again in the span of like 10 minutes. And every single time the team members would very professionally, very compassionately answer the same way, without any kind of sarcasm or anything, without any kind of like, oh, go and check out the announcements or none. I mean, not that that's bad, but it's just, it was amazing. Like just seeing the cordial nature of the team was very strong. And I'm like, this is an incredibly professional team. So that's what I think it takes. It's just both the expertise and the potential together. And I think that Satoshiverse has that.
Well, I really appreciate the kind words, Excalibur. For me, we're building with a vision. It's taking the time it takes to execute that vision, and I feel like sometimes we get our heads down and come up for air. But it is really nice, when we come up for air, that we see kind of this core community that we've built that is just so supportive. And I'm part of a lot of communities, and some of them are great, some of them are toxic. And I don't think we could do this if our community wasn't as great, and supportive as it is. So I know I get up with that motivation, and it's really nice to know that our community is kind of on board and has our back, which is essential, I think, for indie studios in this space. It's something that's much needed, I guess. So just going on to the next question, Eric. I'm curious, with your background, you came from that art collecting background early in the space, and you've done some dabbling in the collectibles more recently. When you're looking at these, kind of just focusing on your perspective on project-based NFTs, when you're looking at these, is the art still kind of front of mind, or do you kind of switch caps and say, you know what, I'm going to take this from the perspective of an investor? Do you separate it in your mind, or is it kind of you're still seeking out stuff that you go, wow, I really like the art behind this?
I mean, I think the short of it is I look at it from both perspectives. And I guess, just thinking about it separately, not necessarily just looking at a collectibles project, but whether or not I'm buying a piece of art, or whether or not I'm buying a PFP project or a collectible project, implicit in that is that, when I am buying this thing, it's an investment, right? And I expect the creator to, take that money and push it, right? So if you're an artist, right, the expectation is that you're going to push your art, right? You're going to create a market for your art. If you're a project, right, it's, you're taking this money and, you're going to build, right? You're going to push your project. And so outside of, certain things that I bought where, I'm trying to support a particular artist, I really love the art. I really don't care. I think that's kind of the hat that I wear. It's really both. And so, yeah, I think that's really, how I look at it.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. So the next question is to Steve. So you're a collector of many different NFT collections, including owning one of the absolute grails of ENS domains, nft.eth. So what are some of your favorite types of NFTs to collect, and why?
To be honest with you, I collect tons of different things for tons of different reasons. So I did buy some Spells of Genesis, some rare Pepes and whatnot. Spells of Genesis, I never intended to play the game. I bought it literally from like a speculative point of view, almost to hold the card. I'm a strange collector of real things. I never have read a comic in my life, although I have hundreds of them. I didn't buy them to read them. I bought them to keep them as perfect condition as possible, and later at one point pass them on to someone else who was looking for something in that condition. So with digital things, I've always just bought to explore. So even when when Jose was doing the comics, I have both of those on Maker's Place. There were some other comics as well that were around, like Buy the Dip comics and things like that. So I always was exploring those. I had a lot of punk comics, both issues 1 and 2. I think I had 5 of each. So I've been kind of exploring just different assets. Again, I was excited to see collectibles come on chain. So almost anything. Things like Top Shots, I have to say, were cool, but not in the presentation and like decentralized model that I was expecting to see them. So even with super rare or so rare, there's really been nothing that's, I guess, impressed me or been like that game changer where the physical things kind of lose the meaning to this new medium. That's still definitely in a lot of collectibles. The IRL takes precedent over anything digital. I think that will change. People's mindset first has to change, but also the value of things, I think, has to be comparable before people will buy into that there's value for something that's untangible, because a lot of people are taught if you can't hold it, there's no value to it. Kind of like the old school way of thinking, where this like defeats that whole purpose of that model. So I myself was buying things just because I like them. All the Red Lion Eye issues, I own like the first 7 of those. I love those. I wanted to see magazines come online. Just new ideas. Gazers by Matt Kane. Things that are forever changing, and you can have expectations in the future. I love those. What Josie did with cyber brokers, giving you something of substance and then tons of value after the fact for no extra, ask or financial incentive. So like these projects, I think, are fueling this space, and there's a lot of good, relevant arguments to be had if someone talks shit about the NFT space. There's a lot of quality things now we can show them that are surviving. They're growing. They're doing exactly what they promised and more in some cases. But we've got way more rugs, bad headlines, and everything else coming our way. So once, I don't know, there's a balance there, or once it's a lot easier to just work without all the noise, a lot of this will go down. And as soon as you get one buy-in from a mainstream giant, that will turn the tides of not only their competition, but their existing community. And even something like the Sandbox, there was a regular centralized game similar to it, the Sandbox, that had 20 million users. So if something like that were to partner with the Web3 and encourage some of the migration over here as their business changes and adapts as well, I think you'd have some like big chunks of mass amount of new users coming in and trickling in over a shorter period of time than usual. And as soon as there's a demand, and Epic and them, soon as they see their stock or their community bitch about anything, if Web3 picks up that slack, they have a real problem. If you ignore this and you're losing out, you can't catch up any longer. And so to keep in the know on what's going on in Web3, Web2 should be paying attention to every single step being made here, because it can not only take your market share, it can destroy your entire model. And so if it's done right here with the quality, and they're poaching us, we're poaching some traditional, but as soon as there's one Fortnite style or some like huge blow up where you have hundreds of millions of people who know what this is and are engaging, if there's no barriers to entry, technically that's like a silent white flag for Web2 saying like this model by the masses demand has won out. And I'm thinking by 25 to 27, those 2 years are pretty much where like this play out will take place. And thanks to Satoshiverse and other things who push us forward, who bootstrap and who build for years and years, like these are the things that Web2 things came out of nowhere, but really it took 5 years, tons of time and tons of money. But if you can blindside them, then that's exactly what it takes to kind of, to change that mindset of the users.
Beautiful. Thanks, Steve. So real quick before we move on, for those of you who've been with us before, you know that we do a giveaway every single week. So we're going to be giving away another one of our 8mo Army avatars. And this week, the winner is qfs.eth or @hangducks. Congratulations to the winner, and please send us a DM and we'll make sure to get you our prize. So next question is to Sean at Comics and Crypto. So your big focus is on collecting licensed collectible NFTs. What about the licensed digital collectible market excites you?
Yeah, the psychology of a collector is so fascinating to me. It's the idea of personal connection, nostalgia, and when you have an opportunity to invest in the things that you love, the things that you grew up with, that's really special. And when we have an opportunity right now, for example, like on the VB Digital Collectibles platform on Palm NFT, they're dropping DC collectibles. People have an opportunity to invest in this stuff. And a lot of people over the past year and a half who are never collectors ever in their life, we've talked to probably over a few hundred people at this point personally, and they're now not just getting heavily involved in the digital collectible space, but they're buying physical collectibles. They're spending a lot of money on comic books. I know one gentleman at New York Comic Con that I met, he said, Sean, I'm 55 years old. I've never read a comic book in my life. And I just spent $100,000 on physical grails over the past year. And it's because I started in the digital collectible space. And that is really special. That's really special. And now recently, VV announced their partnership with Sesame Street. And it got tremendous backlash. People were really upset. And I get it for people who aren't really involved in Web3. They don't understand because they just keep hearing negative things like FTX, rug pulls. But what they don't understand either is where this technology is going. And a good example, so my family owns a daycare. And I made a video with this digital collectible actually in AR. I'm going to pin it to the top so you guys can check it out. But this is a perfect example of a collectible that we're going to be able to use and play with, but you don't realize it's an NFT. And that's, I think, the connection people are going to make, the distinction. They're going to stay away from the idea of, I'm just going to be able to enjoy this and play with it, and without even realizing it's an NFT. And I know that, I think Teo brought that up earlier, and that's going to be really significant. I mean, especially in the video game space, my goodness. And we just saw Counter-Strike skins sell for $160,000, and just wait until that gets involved with Web3. So yeah, it's really exciting to see where this is all going, and I think it just makes total sense. It makes total sense. And we were talking earlier about history repeating itself. There's actually a really good example of that. And there was an interview with David Letterman and Bill Gates, and I'm sure you've all seen this, where Bill Gates is back in '94, and Bill Gates asked him, what's the internet? What's this thing about? I don't understand it. And nobody in the audience knew what the internet was either. And Bill Gates tried to explain it was a network where people can talk and have conversations and even listen to sports. They just did this breakthrough where you can listen to a sports game. And David Letterman jokes back and says, have you heard of the radio? And have you heard of the tape recorder? Because you can listen to it anytime, but you can just record it on a tape. You flash forward 30 years later, Paris Hilton was being interviewed by Jimmy Fallon, and she was explaining what an NFT was to him. And nobody in the audience knew what it was. And a few weeks later, maybe a month later, she came back on. And Jimmy Fallon talked about how Paris Hilton did a great job explaining it to him, and he ended up buying a Bored Ape. And what I thought was really special about that was that he broke down why he bought this specific ape. And he spent over, I think, $100,000 on this ape. And he's talked about the reasons why. And he said, there's this thing's wearing glasses. This character's wearing glasses that I wear with my daughter. And he's also wearing a sailor hat because I love to sail. And I just love that because he's identifying the psychology of a collector. And I think the technology back in '94, there's no frame of reference. We had no understanding. People had no understanding where the internet was going. But now they do, because we have the world at our fingertips. And I think it's going to move a lot faster with Web3.
Totally. Thanks for sharing, Sean. And then our final question, individual question, is for Teo. So what is it that got you so involved with Guild of Guardians, and what do you think makes their gaming and collectible NFTs so special?
Yeah, thanks again for having me here. And by the way, I just want to say, all you guys talking, I love everything you're saying. It's so true. Yes, checking all the boxes. You're right. That's exactly where we're going. Can't wait. But to talk about Guild of Guardians, what I'm excited about, I do want to say, not financial advice, but they're so underpriced right now. I think the bear market, and they had delays, which all serious Web3 games are having delays. I definitely think new people looking into something, specifically a game that I think will be successful, do your own research. But this is not some crummy little project. This is huge bag. I really think this is one of the unicorns. That's just my opinion. I put a ton of money into it. I'm building a team. I'm putting tons of hours into it. I've been building a team for a year and a half, and the game's been delayed. I think it's Q4 this year is when it's coming out. But that whole time, I've been building and bullish on the project, even seeing all the ups and downs with it. But I want to say a couple things. IMX, it's a flagship game for IMX. If you don't know what IMX is, Immutable X, look into it. Those of you that didn't hear at the very beginning of the call, they just had a partnership with Polygon, which is going to solve a lot of their scaling problems. So we were talking about getting a game scalable. How does one do that? Well, the game's free to play. So there will be people that can just enjoy the game, have no idea there's NFTs involved, enjoy the game, maybe make some money too. And there's going to be people like me specifically, which if anyone in here is a gamer, NFT gamer, I'm a Diablo player. I was just playing Diablo 4. I broke the game in a day. I was addicted, straight up addicted. And I'm 35 with the kid, with the business, with the family. I can't do that nonstop. But with Guild of Guardians, the whole business model is more about being efficient, being consistent, collaborating and coordinating with a team of high-thinking, mathematically inclined individuals to outperform everyone else on a time basis, right? So our goal in my guild, we have a Mythic Guild token. It costs 150 grand to mint one of those. There's only 10 of them, but there's tokens, there's guilds at lower tiers. In their ecosystem, there will be individuals that are operating at a lower level, a mid-tier level, and then a super high functioning top 0.1% level like myself. I'm looking for those types of people. We're not heavily recruiting because we are mostly where we are at, but we're still always headhunting if you've ever built a team. But I would say the way I found Guild of Guardians, I actually ended up, so my first NFT actually, play to earn, like the number 2.net. You should write that down, guys. If you're into NFT gaming, playtoearn.net. I think it's actually the number one NFT gaming website right now. It's got like every NFT game you could possibly imagine and a little bit of information on there. And I got to know the owner of that website, and I bought my first little energy booster token for Guild of Guardians. It was the first NFT I ever bought for like $150 or something like that. And then I kind of went down the rabbit hole seeing where it was going. And I wanted to say earlier, someone had mentioned about expectations, right? Like managing expectations, no matter what you're doing. You don't want to promise someone the world, and if you give them anything less than the world, they're not happy. But I can promise you it is worth your time to look into it and see where they're going. And in this bear market, no matter what, by the way, Satoshi, this project looks awesome. From everything, the passion I'm hearing from all you guys and hearing from you, I definitely personally want to look into it more because it does sound something of interest. Absolutely. Great place to get information here. Thank you so much for having me. But I recommend you guys, I'm here advocating for my team for a project I think is awesome, Guild of Guardians. Just look into them, see where they're going to go. The game starts Q4. I don't think it'll be blockchain integrated fully, but they'll have, I think they called it a beautiful turn. I don't know if you guys have heard of MindLoader, but they created Final Fantasy VII Remake. They're working on the Metroid remaster. They made The Last of Us, a really, really big development company. GOG, Guild of Guardians, went through 80 different developers. They just got rid of their previous one. And after 80 interviews, very extensive interviews, they went on with MindLoader, and the new game director is Chris Clay, which he was a game designer for Magic the Gathering Arena. So I'm really bullish on where they're headed. And I think a year or 2 or 3 from now, they said their goal is to be a household name, and they're going to be building it for decades, right? So if they actually do deliver, remember, set expectations realistically. But if they do and you plant your flag now in the bear market with just some stuff you can afford to lose or whatever, don't put any money in, play for free. Maybe that will be something that actually turns into something. Who knows? But I'm looking for a game I can pick up, put down, play on my phone. I don't want a Diablo game where I'm playing 24/7 at my computer. By the way, you had mentioned 30 frames per second. I've been playing Overwatch at 240 frames per second, and dear God, it's beautiful. Oh my God, just built a new computer. You'll never want to go back, but it's freaking awesome. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say about that. And thank you guys all so much for everything y'all have been saying and inviting me here to speak. So.
Absolutely, it's been great to have you on. I'm a fan of what Guild of Guardians is doing. You know, there's so many projects that, you know, fly under the radar for one reason or another, and I think that Guild of Guardians is an example of a team that's doing the right things. So really cool to have. You know, I always get excited when I see really passionate community members because it's pretty easy to pay someone to hype you, but it's much nicer when people come in and just genuinely are invested in the project, whether that's financially or emotionally. So good to hear that kind of passion. We got to get you in the alpha of Satoshiverse and give you kind of a different type of game that you can mess around with and see if you like it. But
can't wait. Please send me
definitely.
an invite. I want to play. Let's try.
Absolutely. Let's do it. All right. So we're at the top of the hour. So I want to just take a moment to thank everybody for joining. You know, if there's anything anyone else wants to jump on and say, anything you've got going on, please feel free to. But otherwise, I know everyone on this panel is extremely busy, and taking time out of the day at different time zones is difficult. So thank you so much for joining. This has been a pleasure for me, really informative. We do this every week. If you are new to the podcast or to the Twitter spaces, I don't know if you could calls a podcast, but whatever. We'll be back next week. We try to shoot for Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll have another awesome panel next week and be talking about gaming in the metaverse. So thank you all for joining. Again, if anyone wants to add some closing remarks, feel free. But otherwise, thanks so much for your time.
Let's freaking go.
All right. Hearing no remarks, we'll close it out. But thanks again, everyone. Thanks for those of you who listened and joined, and see you next week.
Thanks, Nick.
Have a good one, everybody. Thank you.